Greetings, mortal. In the grand tradition of video game development, where delays are as inevitable as taxes and player feedback is treated with the reverence of a particularly stubborn parking ticket, Bungie has once again demonstrated its unparalleled flair for turning anticipation into a mild form of collective bewilderment. Enter the Marathon server slam, that most generous of pre-launch gestures, a free, open-to-all weekend of server stress testing for their forthcoming extraction shooter, Marathon. One might have expected a polished preview of sci-fi daring-do on the forsaken colony of Tau Ceti IV. What the punters received instead was a masterclass in how to make a game feel simultaneously overambitious and undercooked. How very sporting. For those who have somehow avoided the hype cycle, and one does envy such blissfully ignorant souls, Marathon is Bungie's bold pivot into the crowded extraction shooter arena, a genre already groaning under the weight of Tarkov clones and Apex pretenders. Announced with much fanfare some years back, the project has weathered more delays than a British rail service in winter, not to mention the small matter of an art asset scandal that had the internet clutching its pearls back in 2025. But never mind all that, here we were, in late February 2026, with the full game slated for a triumphant March 5th release, and Bungie throwing open the digital doors for a 4- or 5-day server slam. Come one, come all, the invitation seemed to whisper. Test our servers. Test our patience. Test the very limits of human endurance in poorly labeled menus. Initial signs were promising, if one enjoys the sort of breathless optimism usually reserved for first-time marathon runners who haven't yet discovered shin splints. Steam concurrent players reportedly crested around 143,000 souls at peak, a respectable turnout for a title that had, until recently, been hovering somewhere between cautiously intrigued and quietly forgotten. Players queued up, guns metaphorical blazing, eager to extract loot, shoot runners, the game's oddly athletic term for opponents, and perhaps even enjoy themselves. Alas, the slam, much like its namesake, delivered a rather more bruising encounter than advertised. The first casualty of any war, as the saying goes, is the truth. In this particular skirmish, the first casualty was the user interface. Oh, the UI. One cannot discuss the server slam without genuflecting in the general direction of this glorious abomination. It has been described, by players of varying degrees of eloquence, as font slop, a typographical crime scene, and what happens when a graphic designer is given unrestricted access to every sans serif font ever conceived and then locked in a room with Red Bull. Menus cluttered with tiny icons that require the visual acuity of a hawk on steroids, health bars and shield indicators that blend seamlessly into the background like particularly shy chameleons, mid-fight text prompts that demand one pauses the action to squint at paragraphs of lore. Console players, bless them, reported navigation that felt less like intuitive control and more like attempting to assemble flat-pack furniture using only a spoon and sheer force of will. Bungie's UI designer, in a move of quite breathtaking confidence, reportedly defended the aesthetic as intentional sauce. Sauce, one presumes, of the variety that overwhelms the meal to the point where one can no longer taste the actual food. Players, being the ungrateful wretches they are, begged to differ. Forums lit up, or rather, flickered dimly, with tales of confusion so profound that grown adults were reduced to consulting external wikis mid-match just to remember which button reloaded their weapon. It's not that it's bad, one might imagine a particularly diplomatic soul remarking. It's that it's aggressively, almost admirably, uninterested in being understood. And yet, amid the outcry, Bungie responded with the sort of measured grace one expects from a studio that has, over the years, perfected the art of polite deflection. They opened a dedicated feedback thread. They iterated. They promised improvements. How terribly civilized. But the UI, for all its splendor as a lightning rod of discontent, was merely the entree. The main course was the game's time to kill, or TTK for those who enjoy acronyms almost as much as they enjoy dying instantly. Marathon's combat, you see, operates on a principle best summarized as shoot second, die first. In an extraction shooter, a genre that already delights in punishing the unwary with permadeath-like consequences, this proved divisive to the point of schism. Caught off guard. Dead. Ambushed while looting. Dead. Attempting anything so foolhardy as a prolonged duel. Well, one might as well have brought a white flag and a polite note of surrender. The lethality was, depending on whom one asked, either perfectly tense and rewarding for skilled players, or the gaming equivalent of being mugged by a particularly efficient barista. Polls conducted in the aftermath, because nothing says fun weekend like data collection, revealed a near-perfect split, roughly 47% demanding a slower, more forgiving pace, 46% insisting the current bloodbath was spot on, and a plucky 7% calling for even faster deaths, presumably because they enjoy the masochistic thrill of respawning with the enthusiasm of a Victorian consumptive. Bungie, ever the attentive host, noted the split in their post-slam recap and hinted at potential adjustments. They also floated the idea of dedicated duos queues, a suggestion met with the sort of cautious applause one reserves for a waiter who remembers your usual order after only 3 visits. With launch mere days away, one could almost hear the developers muttering, "Changes? Yes, of course. But let's not get carried away." Then there was the small matter of player retention, or, as it transpired, the graceful exodus. The server slam began with commendable vigor, servers humming, lobbies filling, the air thick with the promise of extraction glory. Yet, as the hours ticked by, concurrent numbers performed a rather elegant swan dive. By the final day, the servers were slamming less with activity and more with the echo of absent footsteps. Players cited boredom, confusion, and the creeping realization that extracting a few bottles of alien milk and some suspiciously drinkable cheeseburgers, yes, the game tracks these things with the precision of a Victorian census, might not quite justify the emotional investment. One moment the lobbies were bustling, the next, it was tumbleweed and the faint sound of disappointed sighs. "I came for a sci-fi extraction epic," the collective groan seemed to say. "I left with a headache and a newfound appreciation for single-player campaigns." Gameplay itself offered further delights for the discerning critic. Gunplay, to be scrupulously fair, received the occasional nod of approval, crisp, satisfying, the sort of thing that might have shown in a different context. But the surrounding systems? A mixed bag, served with a side order of bewilderment. Movement felt clunky, the heat mechanic, essentially stamina with a more industrial name, drained faster than a politician's promises, and ammo conservation became less a strategy and more a form of self-flagellation. Maps were described as humdrum at best and a collection of identical shipping containers arranged by someone with a grudge against cartography at worst. The beginner zone, thoughtfully provided to ease newcomers in, felt emptier than a vegan barbecue. Venture beyond it, and suddenly every corner harbored a runner ready to relieve you of your hard-earned loot. Looting, that cornerstone of the extraction experience, proved particularly opaque. Items blended into the environment with the subtlety of a chameleon at a colorblind convention. Was that glowing widget a vital upgrade or merely decorative detritus? One could only guess, often at the cost of a swift and ignominious death. And the economy, medical supplies vanishing faster than free samples at a supermarket opening, left many wondering whether they were playing an extraction shooter or auditioning for a role in a particularly austere survival documentary. Technical hiccups added their own peculiar charm. PC players reported mouse input lag whenever they dared run streaming software, a bug swiftly patched, one must concede, but not before inspiring a wave of forum posts that veered between mild irritation and outright existential despair. Voice chat, that most essential of multiplayer social lubricants, began the event in a state of selective muteness. Network errors, affectionately dubbed weasel codes, in certain circles, made cameo appearances. Console navigation felt like an afterthought, as though the development team had glanced at the controller and thought, "Ah yes, inputs. Those will sort themselves out." Throughout it all, Bungie displayed a level of responsiveness that bordered on the miraculous. Real-time fixes rolled out, lobby sizes increased on the beginner map to combat the eerie quiet, voice chat bugs were squashed, censored names were liberated from their redacted prison. Their post-slam missive was a model of corporate humility. "Thanks for the feedback, chaps, we've learned ever so much." They promised further iterations on UI readability, movement fluidity, and that pesky TTK debate. One almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Yet the controversy lingers, as controversies so often do when a game launches into an already skeptical marketplace. The server slam was meant to build hype, to reassure fans that the delays and past missteps had been worth it. Instead, it has become a sort of Rorschach test for the industry. Optimists see a game with strong foundations and a developer willing to listen. Pessimists see a title that still feels like an expensive beta, priced at a premium and burdened by expectations it may never quite meet. Player counts post-slam have continued their gentle decline, and with the full release now upon us, the question hangs in the air like a poorly optimized particle effect. Will the changes land in time, or are we witnessing the beginning of yet another life service cautionary tale? One must, of course, admire the sheer audacity. In an era of endless battle royales and extraction derivatives, Bungie has managed to create something that feels both derivative and uniquely frustrating. The art style remains striking, the soundtrack suitably atmospheric, the gunplay occasionally brilliant. These are not trivial achievements. But when the menus require a thesaurus and the combat demands the reflexes of a caffeinated squirrel, one cannot help but wonder whether the server slammed the brakes on momentum rather more effectively than intended. As the dust settles on Tau Ceti IV and the servers, mercifully, return to whatever passes for normal in the world of Bungie netcode, the community remains divided. Many players have already moved on, muttering darkly about hero shooters that forgot to include the heroes and extraction games that extracted all the fun. For the rest of us, it is simply another chapter in the long, occasionally hilarious saga of games that promise the universe and deliver, well, font slop. In the end, perhaps that is the true genius of the marathon server slam. It didn't just test the servers. It tested our collective tolerance for ambiguity, our patience with opacity, and our willingness to die repeatedly for the sake of a few virtual cheeseburgers. And in that regard, dear listener, it was an unqualified triumph. One can only hope the full release remembers to include a map. Or at least a readable one. This is your humble servant the Nerd Reaper, and I put the grim gaming takes in the bag.